Hello, trick or treat. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different and I'm going to read you a story. So that's why it's a bit dark in here, because you don't have to look at me for once. You can just listen to my spooky voice. Okay, this is called Childhood Friend. Do you ever have flashbacks from your childhood? Little things, like the certain smell of plastic takes me right back to My Little Ponies, and the Terminator 2 theme music evokes memories of me kissing my Edward Furlong posters. But sometimes we bury things. Maybe it was a test you did really badly on, or that time we saw the neighbour's cat after it had been run over. We discard these memories and hide them in our subconscious, but sometimes they come back. A few months ago, my parents asked if we would like to come and stay with them at an old farmhouse we used to stay in sometimes when I was a kid. They'd been back a few times since, but I hadn't personally returned since I was around 11. It was right in the middle of the Devon countryside, and we used to love it there. Since I now have a 7-year-old of my own, and we were having a year off from expensive international travel as we were extending our home, they thought it might be nice for us to all stay together so my daughter could experience some of the old-fashioned countryside fun that I had loved as a child. Why not, I thought. My husband and I both worked hard, and our daughter was so used to theme parks and exotic beach holidays. This might be just what we all needed. As the days got closer to the date of the holiday, I found I had a very small nagging feeling in my mind. Now, I usually get anxious before we travel anyway, worried I'll forget the passports or the travel money, so I put it down to that. I just couldn't shake a feeling of trepidation. One morning at work, whilst I was on a break from the busy courtroom, my husband and I are both criminal lawyers, I decided to call Mum. Mum, I began, when we used to stay at Lane Farm, did anything bad ever happen? To be honest, I felt stupid even asking. Here I was, sat in Crown Court, working on a nasty rape case, and I was asking if I'd ever had a boo-boo as a child and forgotten about it. Mum laughed. No, darling, she answered. You absolutely adored the place. Couldn't wait to go back each year. But for some unknown reason, that didn't settle my nerves. Still, life is busy, and all too soon it was time for the drive down to Devon. My daughter was beside herself with excitement, and my husband was looking forward to a few relaxing days away from the office. The closer we got to Lane Farm, the more anxious I felt. Hadn't changed a bit in almost 30 years. Everything in the house reminded me of my childhood. It was like being transported right back in time. Our daughter ran around the place like a mad thing. Oh, she was so happy to be there and spend time with her grandparents. She wanted to stay in the exact bedroom I'd slept in. When I opened the door to the room, I swear it was even the exact old bedspread I'd had. That first night was really unsettled, but only for me. The fresh country air and a long walk through the fields had worn us all out, but I was the only one tossing and turning. I kept having strange dreams. Not bad, but unnerving. I was here in the farmhouse, but I was my daughter's age. I was an only child, so I never brought any friends with me. But in the dream, it seemed like I was playing with someone. I woke up drenched in a cold sweat, and the feeling of unease had intensified. Did I ever make any friends when we stayed here? I asked the next morning at breakfast. I needed a very big cup of coffee. Mum looked at me, sort of strangely. No, dear, she replied. We never saw anyone else while we were here. That was part of the appeal. You never appeared to be lonely, though. You spent a lot of time in the garden, playing games and entertaining yourself. You always had a good imagination, my darling. Maybe that was it. My imagination. Yes, it does wander off sometimes, and I was always very creative as a child. But still, it didn't feel like it had been explained properly. I tried not to let my worries get in the way of the holiday. We all relaxed, and it was great to be away from the hustle and bustle of the office and the courtroom. My favourite thing to do was watch our daughter unwind and get back to play mode. Even at 7, she'd sometimes feel self-conscious talking to her dolls and making up games. here, with no one else around and no YouTube or Netflix distractions. She played for hours out in the back garden, having tea parties and playing a very cute game of hide and seek all by herself. Just like you used to, my dear, Mummy commented. It was on the long drive home that I suddenly remembered. I was sat in the back of our daughter. My husband was in the front listening to a rugby game on the radio. We were playing I Spy, and then began chatting about the best things that we got up to during the holiday. I loved playing, my daughter said enthusiastically. I really miss being able to do that. You can play at home, darling, I replied. You don't have to be on the farm to have tea parties and make up games. Yeah, but I won't have Mr. Tiggles with me, she replied. I felt like my heart had stopped. What did you say? I asked her. Mr. Tiggles won't be at home, she replied calmly. He told me he's not allowed to leave the farm. He has to stay there so he can play with the next little girl who comes along. I felt ice cold. In a flash, all those memories came flooding back to me. My secret childhood friend, who only I ever saw at the farm. He was the reason I loved to play in the garden there and never felt lonely, because he was there to play with me. But I wasn't allowed to tell anyone about him, or we would have to go away. My imaginary friend, to this day, I have never, ever spoken about. Not to my parents, my husband, no one. Mr. Tiggles. If he was my made-up friend from 30 years ago, and no one in the whole entire world knows about him, with a pretty unusual name, how the hell did my daughter know about him? The thing is, Mummy, she whispered very quietly, I'm not supposed to talk about him, so don't tell anybody else. Shh. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that.